Be about a couple of different topics. It will be physical inventory, renting scanners, using the scanners to do the inventory, a little bit about cleanup, and maybe a little bit about the end of year type reports that some folks would run too. We do have different sets of documentation on those, but for the purpose of this training session, we're going to use version 9.5.102. And I think for the most part, everybody here is on a fairly recent version, so it shouldn't look terribly different for you. There are a couple of quick refreshers. I want to make sure everybody remembers. Most people will, but just for the sake of the video here. When you're looking at any given inventory item in Anthology, and right now I'm in the Master Files inventory area, there are multiple fields we use to identify the item. Whether it's a book, a t-shirt, doesn't matter. You'll see that we have a field. The first one we label as ISBN/SKU. Now that could be the ISBN 10 flavor, could be the ISBN 13 flavor, could be a UPC code if it's, a t-shirt or something. It's really whatever primary ID you might identify something by. In fact, in a tech sense, when we're talking about these fields, you might hear us call this SKU 1. There is an alternate ISBN field. It's simply the translation from the 10 to the 13. And depending on how you're set, some people want to have the 13. The ISBN 13 is their primary code, and there's a setting and tools for that. In that case, they would start to see the ISBN 10 in this alt field and the ISBN 13 in this first primary field. This is not an editable field. This is really just a translation so that folks can see quickly both flavors of the ISBN. It's this field, the item/UPC, sometimes called SKU2, is your alternate location. And I've got a set of books here in front of me that have some really good examples of they may have the different ISBN, but I have two of them that actually have the same UPC. And I want to show you that kind of case. That is one of the more often asked questions when folks are to the point of downloading a batch and things look a little off. So I've got some examples here, hopefully, that will kind of imitate real life, so to speak. So as long as everybody's aware that we've got ISBN/SKU, aka SKU1, and then there's item UPC/SKU2, and those are kind of the two primary codes that anything might be identified by. You don't necessarily even have to use the second one. It's just an option out there if you need it. And the other detail I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of is that with physical inventory, the utility, when you create a new one, it is a copy of your inventory at the moment you do it. So for reasons of having the discrepancy units and dollar amounts calculated with essentially the same point in time, it would be important for the morning that you're going to start your physical inventory. We're going to use those rental scanners to create that PI fresh that morning, even just a few moments before you get started. You wouldn't want to create it 3 or 4 days before time, because as your stores open and you're selling items, your inventory on hands will change. And so that snapshot you create will get further and further out of date. Yes, you can manage to deal with it anyway, but just for simplicity's sake, it would be just a good idea. Create your PI fresh the morning you're going to do your actual counting. And there are options for doing a full inventory, or for maybe Susie, you guys might be interested in the partial inventory. And partial inventories do have a couple of special bits, so we'll maybe tuck some of that to the very end. But I think Susie, the overall, we'll aim it as a full physical inventory. And you'll get a chance to see some of the same methods and tools that you would use. We'll just have a couple little caveats for you at the end about, hey, if you're just going to do this one section. So we'll kind of start with a full PI picture, and we can talk about the sort of one-off situations from there. Just kind of as a quick refresher, being physical inventory, most folks are right about the end of the year here, their financial year, their fiscal year at least. So just as a quick review, the 3 reports that you typically would want to run at the end of the year, either end of December 31st or before the store gets busy on the 1st or the next day. But those would be inventory status. That's to get the value of your inventory, your on-hand amounts, your cost value at cost, your value at retail, margin markup, and some other details. You also would want to get a snapshot of what your sales history had been for the past year. Now, sales history you can pretty much run any time and choose whatever date range and even up to a certain hours. So you might save off the sales history report, save that somewhere handy. And then the third report is going to be the historical Z-tape. Again, that's just pick your date range for the entire year, and that's where you'll see things like your total sold, taxable sales, non-taxable sales, tax amount collected. If you had to break it down between city, state, local tax, you'll have that information as well. So just quick refresher, end of year reports are inventory status. That one is very important. You cannot run that one later on. You have to have run this report the day you need those numbers. April 14th, if you needed to get the value of your inventory as of the end of December, by April 14th, it's kind of too late to pull that number. So if you haven't already done your report of inventory status, just do it now, save it off, just track what date you did it, and I'll show you a little bit later on how you can kind of back in the sales and back out the receiving. So inventory status, historical Z-tape, sales history, those are kind of the major end of year. There are lots of other reports, but we can get into those another time. So physical inventory is both a good time to correct the count number, the on-hand amounts in your system, but it's also a good time to fix things like the section was misspelled, or we had two sections that were really, now we've combined them into one. The prices were wrong. Wait a minute, the discount, why does this item have a really weird discount? Those kinds of questions do come up during physical inventory, especially having done it in a while. So you kind of do have to be prepared for different kinds of issues, things that you might need to pause and look at. Some people go with the method of, you know what, if you're not sure about it and you're counting that bookshelf, just bring that book up to the counter or make a pile somewhere. We'll deal with those weird, not sure, something's weird about it. We'll deal with those towards the end. Some people want to deal with them at the moment they find them. Everybody has their favorite method, but I'll show you some batches here that kind of mock up those deal with it right now or deal with it later type situations that you will run into. That's kind of standard. I do have a regular store barcode scanner handy here, and I've already gone through and I've created a few scans of different barcodes. So I have a pile of Oz books here. This one is the ISBN 13 that was on the inside front cover. These are all paperbacks I've got for sample. This is the ISBN 10 that was written on the inside cover just above the barcode that translated into the 978 into the 13 digit. And then on the very back cover, these are a little bit older, these are from the 80s. The back cover has a barcode, but it is not a book barcode. It is a UPC. It's actually 12 digits long, and you can see I've even tucked it under the name UPC item SKU 2. This is that alternate code that I would put into my inventory, just in the off chance that I had a clerk that scanned the back cover, not realizing that the real barcode, the real book barcode, is on the inside front cover. And in fact, I may even have a picture handy so everybody can see. Being familiar with barcodes is a good thing to get maybe a little refresher on when you're first doing physical inventory, especially if you have a new staff person, somebody that may not be familiar that in the book industry they do these odd things like ISBN 10 and ISBN 13. So I will see if I can open up this one here. So this is the cover of the book, of one of them, and this is the inside front cover. You can see the full barcode. That is the EAN barcode, starts with 978, but it also has the 10-digit printed. And then there is a third picture, which is of the back cover. Now notice I do have the ISBN 10 written out, but this barcode down here that starts with 07099, this is a UPC barcode. So it's going to be very important for my store staff that's doing the physical inventory, especially if it's like my sister who might be helping out who doesn't normally deal with bookstores. I want to make sure everybody who's going to be handling a scanner, whether it's a rental or the barcode scanner, that they're familiar that there are two flavors of barcodes out there. And if it's a paperback, on average, you might take a look at the inside front cover, and I usually use the keyword of, if you see 978, that's probably the one you want, unless it's a toy or a non-book item. And then show them, this is a non-book barcode. This is probably the code I would have put on, I don't know if this was a stuffed bear or something. This is more akin to the code I would see on a sideline item. But I have the ability to store both codes in my system just in case during regular cash register sales that barcode is scanned. So let's create a quick brand new physical inventory. I will go to Inventory Control and then Physical Inventory. Now, I haven't done any previous ones lately. I've got all mine cleaned out. You may see other ones if you've done it before. I think, Donna, you guys probably will see your previous ones, but you can set it to just show you the open ones. But to create a brand new one, I'll do F4 New PI. Give it whatever name works for what you're working on, whether it's a full PI or maybe it's just end of year. Everybody has their naming convention. I'm just going to put the version number on mine here. Now, in this case, I want to do a full inventory, and I will have rental scanners. I do have some items that aren't barcoded that I will have to maybe hand count and deal some way. We'll get to those in a minute. But I, for the most part, will be scanning 90% of my store, and I intend to count everything. I also will be using these rental scanners that will let me download the scans I've done from the bookshelf. I run up to the counter where I'm kind of driving that PI, and I will dump those scanners. So I need to make sure I'm creating a full snapshot of the inventory. And then the next question, for those that are going to be renting scanners, you probably want to leave this just as it is with the default set to no. If you're not sure what the details are on the screen, read the message a little bit further, but in essence, if you're doing rental scanners, say no. The ones that might use yes, that's sort of a different situation. Susie, you and I may want to talk about that option towards the end. That may be what you want to use because you're doing a rolling PI throughout the year. But for now, let's focus as if everybody's going to do rental scanners and do a full PI. So we'll say, no, we don't want to edit by exception. We want those count quantities to be 0 when we first get in because we're going to be doing the counts ourselves. Now, it's going to take a snapshot of your inventory. If your store's been open a very long time, it may take more than a minute or so, but mine's pretty small, so that was already done. Now that it is filled in the screen, the very first thing I should do is just take a moment and F10 save. And now I'm kind of ready. Some people want to create this PI in their server. Great. If it's faster for you, doesn't really matter where you create it from. Just make sure you create it kind of the day of. And you can see my own inventory is kind of gunky. I have lots of ugly items in here, but we'll say those are on purpose. So we've created our brand new PI. We've done an F10 save. Now we're kind of at the point where we've got our scanners. Maybe they're plugged into a little side charging port so that they're kind of purging. Maybe you charged them overnight. A couple of the last steps that you want to do, and especially do these steps the weekday or office day before your physical inventory. So if you're going to start a PI on a Saturday, by Friday morning, Friday early afternoon, please take a moment and get those scanners connected and test a couple of little mini batches. Even just to the point of you create a quick PI, scan an item, download it, just to make sure that communications process is working. What you don't want to have happen is Saturday morning having not done any of that and then find out, okay, we can't get it to communicate. Pager service is not going to be available to start from scratch and train you on the whole process of PI. So physical inventory is a serious enough thing where you should take some time ahead of time to get familiar with it and watch the videos and get your scanners ready. But I will show you what some of those steps that I've kind of done in advance on mine. Under the Actions menu, one of the first things I need to do after I've gotten those rental scanners in the mail is I need to specify what scanner model I'm going to use. And this year, most of you probably would be using these little silver Opticons. I believe they're called OPN 2001s. You'll notice when we go to Actions and Specify Scanner, it doesn't show OPN 2001. However, it's pretty much the exact same thing as what we're labeling here as the CS1504. If you're not sure at the time you're doing PI which one to pick, just give us a buzz. But just know that right now you can leave it on the symbol CS1504, and that will work with these little silver and black Opticon scanners. I'll just save that. Now I need to enter in the license code. So down in the Actions menu is Enter Review License Code for Scanning, and usually with an email from tech when the scanners have been shipped out to you, or possibly in the paperwork that's in the box, we may have printed the code. It's usually a 16-digit number, a mix of numbers and letters. Ideally, you would want to paste it into the field, not try to key it in, mostly because it may be hard to read and see in the font. Is that a 1 or is it an L or is it a uppercase I? So pasting is a better option, and you can see I've already done that here. I've already set mine up for the next couple of weeks. So I've already entered my code in. I would have done F12 post. That's what have started showing me the new date. I know I'm good to go, so I can cancel out of this screen. So now we are at a point where we can start scanning some things. It would be a good idea that when you start the morning of, to start out with just a couple of small tests. Even if you left the scanners to charge all night long and they worked fine yesterday, a Windows update could have run in the middle of the night, a cable could have gotten unplugged and plugged to a different port. It's always a good idea to start small, at least with just a couple of quick scans and a quick download to make sure, yes, they're all communicating, all 6 of them are, whatever. Don't try to start out and the very, very first thing scan 1,000 items and the first time that day try to download those 1,000 items. That's just a lot of work that you could end up redoing for lack of just doing one quick little test. So I'm going to grab a book here, one of the ones that is in my system, and you can't see it, but maybe you'll be able to hear it. That's 1 unit scan. In fact, I'll scan just a few more to have something. Now, I've already done the part where my scanner has been connected to my computer. I actually have the physical USB cable still connected to my tower, and I have the small USB end just sitting here on my desk ready for me to connect the scanner directly to. I'm not ever really going to move that cable off the computer the whole time I'm doing this inventory. I'm going to plug in my scanner. And right now it just flashed very briefly red. It's now showing solid green, which means it's A, it's communicating with Anthology, B, it also happens to be fully charged. Now the next step, I'm going to pull down one of those scanner batches, and I'm just going to give it a quick label in this update note. These update note fields, this gets copied down into the batch, the next batch you download. So this might be a good place to write Jane from did children's section and came back at 12:32, whatever might help you keep track. That way you can know, oh yeah, she was over in this corner at this time and Joe had scanner number 12 and he was over in that corner. That might help you find answers to, okay, just downloaded somebody's scanner, they already took off with the next empty one, but they downloaded stuff and something looks weird. So if you keep track, maybe even a paper log of who came back with what scanner and where they were at, that might help you if you're trying to solve a mystery a little bit later on. But I will put in an update note. I'll just do a quick F10 save. And now I'm going to pull down the data from the scanner. And to do that, I can either hit Alt F6 on my keyboard or the Alt F6 on the screen down here. But Alt F6 is saying get data from scanner, and you might hear this next bit. So that series of beeps was the sort of good audible signal of scanner was communicating, stuff was downloaded, and at that time it also did a command to the scanner. Once it knew it downloaded the scan batch, this one right here, it's also cleared the memory of the scanner. Some older documentation may be saying that you should clear the scanner out with every batch. It's not going to hurt if you do. It does eat a little bit of the battery space, but just know that for the most part, if you got a good scan download and you can see its contents, then more than likely their scanner is fine. You can unplug it and hand it to the next person so they can take off and go scan their next area. So now I'm here at the sort of the main workstation that's driving the entire physical inventory. I've downloaded my first scanner batch, and you can see there's my note that I put in, so I would have a record of who this was from. Now, I did happen to scan the same thing 4 times, so I see 4 entries. The way we download these batches and show them initially is the entry order. And you can also go into your actions menu if you've had to sort things maybe by title to find the ones that were blank titles that were maybe not matched, or you were trying to find something else. You can always return back to that original state. Excuse me. My alarm. You can always return back to the original sorting state by going to actions and saying entry order, or F3. Because these are all the same title, one of the next steps I would do is just do a quick F6 consolidate quantities. It doesn't matter when I scan something. If I have 3 units, I can scan all 3 of them mixed in between a bunch of other stuff. It doesn't matter. When I do that F6 consolidate, it knows to just add up all those line items from that batch. I should do an F10 save before I go on to the next bit though. So that item that I just did a quick test scan, it recognized it, it found it in the inventory. You can see that I've got the title, and we've added a few other fields that we didn't have in the past. Now you have distributor and publisher in this view. So these are usually the prime fields that folks are wanting to fix when they're doing PI. This is a good chance to peek at it and go, yep, that's the right section, or no, that's the wrong department. So you will have the ability to fix things as you go through and do your inventory as well. But for the sake of just doing a test scanner batch download, that looks good. Normally I would go through and kind of look at this and see, is there anything that's missing a title? Those would be things that it didn't find a match for, or there's something a little more going on there. You might see items with a very long string. So one of the steps that, or the tasks really, you're going to have is as you download each scanner batch, you would want to take a quick glance at it, make sure nothing major looks wrong. And if there is something wrong at that time, that might be a good time to tell your runner, the person that you're going to have do the running back and forth, or the person who just came back from that section. You're going to want to look at that list and go, okay, it all looks good, or hey, wait a minute, something looks wrong. Can you please go look at the shelf again? Some people will do that right as each batch is downloaded. Some people will make a policy of just dump them all as fast as you can, delete anything that looks weird, and yank that weird title and throw it in a pile. We'll deal with the weird ones at the very end. It's up to you, whatever works best, but I'll show you some examples in a moment here of what those kind of weird items might be. Normally though, if everything's all well and good, I've done my consolidate quantities, I've saved it. One of the last steps I would do if I'm happy with the batch would be to do this, what I call mini batch, is to post this update, this scan status. I don't know if I can actually highlight it. Right there, that status of scan, that's the status we use to indicate you've just downloaded a scan batch. You haven't done anything with it as far as accepting or finalizing those numbers. As I go through and I post an update, it will change the status of this batch, this scanner batch, number 1, from scan to, I believe, update. Let me get my screen saved here. And apparently I have to switch back to my regular icon. There we go. Yes, I want to post this update. And notice we're back on the open status all of a sudden. That's because my filter was set to show me just the open ones, and that scan batch was completed. Just to kind of show you where that was, I'm going to sort. You're going to see all my history here, but let me make this grid a little bigger. So this green PI entry, the one that has a status of open, that's what you might call the master record. That is sort of your working picture. But this grayish record down here with a status of update, that is that scan batch number 1 that we just downloaded and we did a quick review on, and then we posted it. It's technically done. I can't really change anything. I can print this if I need. Maybe I need to figure out, okay, this had a weird item in it. In fact, when you do a print, there is this exception report option. That's what you might use to hand back to your runner to say, hey, go back to that shelf that you were just looking at, and you'll see in this printout, it's going to show you the problem record, but it also will put the sort of last known good item right before it. So you can go along and find, oh, there's the Emerald City of Oz. It was the next item that was something weird was about it. It didn't read right. Yank it and go put it in a pile. As you go through and you start downloading more and more batches, you'll have a bunch of them that might have a status of scan. Those just mean that they haven't been sort of approved yet to be put into the main picture. They'll have that status of scan until you do that F12 post. That's still what we'll call the mini post. That's what takes those numbers and adds it to this master PI. And let me shrink these columns down a little bit. Sure, turn off my alarm. If I sort by inventory, or excuse me, count quantity column right now, just as a quick way to show you what we're looking at here, here are those 4 units of that Emerald City title that I scanned with the rental scanner and brought back to the counter. Notice that that 4 units is in count quantity. We also have a total or tote count column and a discrepancy column. Right now, the goal is to go through, scan all those shelving units, download those scanner batches, do the little reviews, and get those scanner batches kind of initially reviewed and approved in that, okay, we're happy with that information. We're going to put it into the count column. It's not until whoever's kind of driving the PI is going through and kind of double checking, maybe it's time for a lunch break, maybe you're done with the west half of the store, whatever you want to do. At some point periodically, whoever's driving this whole thing should take a moment, F10 save, and just do one more little mini F12 post update on this open status purchase order, excuse me, physical inventory. That is going to take whatever is in the count quantity column and add it to the total count. The reason being is that you every so often want to kind of sweep the numbers over from count quantity, the ones that are sort of kind of equivalent to receiving. You're actively counting them. Now you're done with that section of the store. You don't really want to have to worry about those anymore. So by doing that F12 post update, you're going to go in and say, move those numbers to total count. If you find more units of something that you counted on the west half of the store later on in the day, there's no harm to that. It will just continually add to the count quantity as you're posting those mini scanner batches. And as you are kind of comfortable saying, great, we're happy with those numbers, we approve them, you'll do another post update. And you'll just keep adding to that total count column. In the very end of things, when you do the very, very final outright close, complete the PI, adjust things, the Alt F12 adjust INV, that's the one time you'll use that at the very end. That is what will replace your on hand with whatever is in the total count. So these items right here, like this one, where I thought I had 6 on hand at the moment I created the PI this morning, if throughout the course of the physical inventory I never find any units of this guy and I do finalize, its on hand would actually be replaced and changed to a 0. Maybe that's on purpose, great, because whoops, I really didn't have 6. But there are other cases that maybe you found, wait a minute, we had 7. How did we get 7? Well, we'll figure that mystery out later. We just need to get the on-hand count, the physical count in. That's kind of the primary objective. Cleanup type stuff you can do either in the batches themselves. Once you've moved the scan batches to the master PI, you can do cleanup from here, or you know what, we'll just do the really weird cleanups only after everything is all said and done with a PI. It's up to you, whatever works. There's tools for all those cases. So in fact, let me do that post. So now I have an item in that total count. Let me just sort. We'll go back and we'll use him as another example. One other quick item to kind of show you for those of you that will do manual entry stuff. Like I said, if you have some things that maybe don't have a printed barcode, you might print a stock check report the day before. You could also go into Master Files Inventory and kind of create your own little report, something that you might have a piece of paper for somebody to go to that area that has those non-scannable items. They put on a hand count and then they come back up to you and say, okay, I found this item and we had 3. So you can do manual entry as well. You can also do what you might call cash register barcode scanner. You could go into the actions menu while you're on this open PI. You can go to actions and you can say scanner mode or scan mode, and it will put you into scan mode. And from there, you could go through, and I'm just going to zap a couple items here. I don't know if you notice that that Road to Oz title is increasing in the count quantity column as I'm in scan mode. And note, just by touching that, I'm now kind of out of scan mode, but now I'm kind of in, well, I'm in what you might call edit mode. In fact, maybe I found I had 25 units of this. Not sure why, it happens. So instead of scanning 25 times, I could have just done F8 find line, scan it once or key it once, and then just go in and say, no, we really had, for whatever reason, 25 of them. Of course, that gives us a big discrepancy, but that's actually a good example in this case. Let me just F10 save this. Again, as I'm kind of driving this PI, maybe there's a pause in the scanners that are coming back to the counter. I've had a chance to maybe go count the magazines, those few things that are just maybe right next to the counter. Again, you might still want to do that mini F12 update just to kind of scooch those numbers over. And in fact, now that I've done another hand entry, if I do an F12 post update at this point, the net effect over here on the list tab is it has been creating these manual state batches. These are nothing more than, consider them kind of a shipment record, as you see in receiving those gray historical records. These manual scan batches or manual batches are really just a record of what you touched in that master PI and then did a post. So if you had been working on maybe the stuffed toy area and you had gone into the main PI, done scan mode, and put all those numbers in and had done that F12 post update, you would come back to the list tab here and you would see all those items that you touched. And just like in receiving, we show kind of the equivalent what you were actively doing. You were actively counting at that moment. We show the numbers in the count column. But now that I've gone to the open PI and I did that mini post update, I go back to find that one title that was a bunch of R's. I think that's one I had counted. In fact, actually, let's just sort by total count. You'll see, because I did that mini post, that 25 units that was in count quantity 25, it's now been scooched over to total count. And in fact, later on, if I go in and find, whoops, I had actually a 5th unit of this guy, I could simply go back and correct him by adding to the count quantity what I want to have added to the total count in the end. So I can keep increasing the total count as I go through. You don't have to do the post update all the time, but I would say do it 2 or 3 times during the day. It's a good chance it will force you to stop and save, always a good idea. And it will just kind of tidy those numbers up so that you can kind of start your next hour or your next section of the store with nothing in that count quantity column, so that as you are working, you'll be able to kind of quickly see, okay, I see we've done this area. Hey, Sue, can you go find that weird shelf in the corner that I know we just moved half of the stuff to? Those little oddball cases will come up. Let's see. Let me sort by total count one more time here. And here's another case. Let's say that we later on find, wait a minute, I didn't have 25, I counted something else. You can also decrease the total count. Maybe I needed to only have 20 in my total count, so I'm just going to say -5. And adding -5, if I actually can hit the keyboard correctly, adding -5 to 25 would give us 20. And we do that as a way to keep track that at some point you said you have 25, but then you changed it to say you had 5 less than that. And that's a good reason. That will help you track, wait a minute, where was that other 5 units? Or what was the mystery? Oh, it was that shelf in the bottom corner that everybody's forgotten to clean out for the last 5 years. That kind of stuff will happen. That's kind of the purpose of PI, not just to get your on-hands fixed, but to find those oddball things and to clean up the store a little bit. Let me do one more post update, and you will see that that Road to Oz will now show 20 in the total count instead of the 25. But I will have a record that I reduced that by 5. So I'll have a record of, wait a minute, something went wrong here, what happened? Whether I need to spend much time investigating it or not is a different question. At least I have a record that there was some kind of mystery in that corner of the store. That's kind of the quickish, dirty of a quick inventory. Those are some of the core questions, but there are a few other tools that are quite important that I do want to touch on. So I'm just going to save this guy, kind of get him to a certain point. I would like to do a couple of quick scan batches, but now is a good time to maybe pause and see what questions folks have had so far. And Mike did just put up a good prompt that if you are just getting these scanners, rental scanners, Janie normally charges them and is making sure they're clean, but it would still be a good idea when you first get your scanner, hold down that very small, tiny little negative button, if you can even see the label. It's maybe the size of your pinky nail. Hold it down for a good 20 seconds. You'll hear it beep and flash, and that is clearing the memory. It would be a good idea to clear the memory when you're first starting out in a day. Do your quick little test batch, make sure it works, great, clear the scanner. It's up to you if you feel you need to clear that scanner batch every time before handing it off to the next person to go scan. It does use a little bit of the battery. It's not too big of a deal. Just be aware that that negative sign button, that small one, it actually has another function where if you hold it down for, I believe, just a couple of seconds, it actually toggles the sound off. So you might be scanning and not realize it is reading something because it wasn't audibly giving off that beep. There is a document on our customer zone, I believe, that talks about the scanner. It's like a user manual, and it will show you details on what does 1 red flash versus 2 red flashes mean. Let's see, it is, I believe it is the user's manual. Here we go. User manual for the OPN 2001. It shows you little details like, what about how long should you charge it? What about this color button versus this number of beeps? So this is a good reference if you need it. It does go into installing the driver if you even have to anymore. So there's a lot of different good information on here. Somewhere I know there's a spot where it talks about how many scans one charge seems to hold. I think it's several thousand, but that's another good point, is try to make sure that your scanners, if you need to go scan a huge shelf, that's fine, but keep in mind that if you ran into a problem, the larger the unit that you, larger the section that you scan, if something goes wrong, you might be scanning that whole shelving system all over again. So it might be wiser to start off small. Do 300 units, 1 shelf of a shelving unit. Make sure everybody's getting comfortable, you've got things down. And then as you work through the morning and get things really rolling, certainly increase the size of those batches a little bit, but start small to begin with, just as a kind of get warmed up, get the muscles stretched, and get everybody used to what they're working on for the morning. Let's see. I guess at the moment, are there any other questions so far? Uh-oh, I got really quiet. Did I mute everybody?
we have a question that
Sure.
We have to delete the line. What was the question?
Of
Deleting a line from a batch?
Yeah. Do we have to delete it after we figure out what the
You don't
issue is?
necessarily, and actually that's kind of the next thing I wanted to show you. I want to, because I have like, I think I have a chapstick here and some other little thing with a really weird barcode. I've got some things I deliberately want to fail so you can see how to handle those. Now that we've downloaded a batch, what do we do about the weird stuff? And there's a couple of things you might do. So let me grab my scanner. While I'm busy kind of populating a scanner, is there any other questions that I can answer while I'm doing this?
So many of our discrepancies are receiving problems. So we will be showing a negative in physical inventory that once we count, we'll adjust to 0 or 1 or 2, but the on order is still going to be wrong.
Okay.
Is there a way to edit the on orders as we're doing this process, or is that just something we have to go back and afterwards?
Actually, it's kind of a cleanup before kind of thing, and I can show you some tricks on that. Yeah, that's kind of an important thing. I run into that myself with all my gunky testing data. which while we're doing that, why don't we hit that a little bit, because that's a good thing. PI being kind of a cleanup time of year, one of the early tasks you might do leading up to your physical inventory is go into master file sections and start taking a look at all your different sections. Are they names that you like? Are there duplicates like I have right here? I have two personal finances one for some reason. That stuff happens. That's just normal wear and tear on any database. Somebody entered it not realizing it already had it in there. So you might do F11 print to print out your section, just to kind of maybe sit down and kind of look at the list and go, okay, maybe you want to rearrange. This is a good time of year to do that kind of stuff too. So take a look at your sections, tidy that up a little bit if you can. A couple little tricks are if you realize you've got items from two sections that you really want merged down into one. If, for example, these personal finance, the second version I have, if I go to the on hand on order tab, I can mass highlight a chunk of records and I can say I need to reassign them, and I will put them into the correct version of finance. Let me scooch this down so I can see a little bit better. And I'll pick the first version of it. And yes, I want to change, and I'll move those items off. Once I've gone through and I've kind of removed everything in this list and I've put them into the proper section, and this grid is empty, I can safely delete this record. That's one kind of tidy up process that you might do. Another one is to go through and take a look at your outstanding receiving memos. You might actually consider going into reports and do purchase order status and choose maybe just the last several months, whatever works. And you might go by a certain vendor. You might just say, show me anything that's open at this moment, maybe sorted by vendor and then PO number, whatever combination. I'll say use condensed here so I can see a little bit better. This would give you a report of, hey, these are things that still think they're, whoops, I don't want to save to a file, I want to preview it. This would give you a sense of what is still hanging out there. And you'll be able to see things like what date, how old is it? Apparently, I have stuff that were published in 2002, it looks like, that is still hanging out there. Probably not valid anymore. So you might use the PO status report just to kind of get a sense of, wait a minute, what areas still have a huge chunk of undealt with orders. And in fact, maybe you don't want to see the individual titles, you just want to get a sense of what you might focus on first, the really out of whack ones. Okay, I can see my Simon & Schuster has some stuff on it. In fact, let me do, I want summary and I want total. I don't necessarily want to see all the detail, but that's okay. So you can see here's 250 units, 350 units. I probably need to deal with some of these things. But that report might help you if it's more of a sit down, look at it the night before, try to get a sense of what is really important to get rid of. But you can go into your receiving area under inventory control receiving, and you can see I've got a few hanging out here, ones that look like they're from at least 2015, if not older. I'm probably not going to get those. And when you go into receiving, don't forget under the details, you have these two options of show all items, which means show me everything that was ever on this order, or show outstanding. And this is a good way to kind of go through and look at it and go, okay, that's way old, back ordered way long ago. Maybe I've already talked to my vendor since then. I know I'm never going to get it. I could either go through and say, you know what, this particular one, this one title, I'm not going to get. It's canceled. Although I've touched this with a quick receive, so I can't really do it on this one. But if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to get anything on this, you can just delete that entire order altogether, that receiving memo. It won't touch anything you've previously received. If an item is on here and it has a number in the total received, it's a done deal. Voiding this outstanding receiving memo won't touch those done deals. It's only going to touch the stragglers, the left behind ones. So in fact, you could go through and quite quickly, if you're a mouse person or if you're more of a keyboard person, just depends. I can either mouse up to actions and say void, and that one I can't because it's actually being touched with something else. Let me pick a different one. I need to clean up my own testing data. So I can void, and using a mouse can feel a little slow. I'm more of a keyboard person, so I'm just going to hit on my keyboard. I'm on the list tab of receiving. I'm going to hit my Alt key. You might not be able to see it, but there now are these little underlines. And then I'm going to hit the A. And then the V has an underline. So I can do, and that way I got to pick some that are not on receiving memos. Again, very good reason to clean up your inventory. Let's do Alt for actions, A, V for void, yes on my keyboard for void, gone. So I could actually, once I get off ones that are linked, I could quite quickly go through and clean up a very fast amount. So you might consider ahead of time cleaning stuff up. Just be a little wary of how far back you go. If it's maybe 6 months, and you guys have a way better sense of your own inventory, what back order ranges tend to be. Some genres may be 6 months out, some genres are only a couple of weeks out, some genres are a couple of years out. So depending on how far back something is back ordered, using the show outstanding items only will help you zero in on things that might still be out there, maybe for no reason or a good reason, and it should be kept. So you could go through and mark the ones that you don't ever intend on getting, just mark them as canceled, but that will leave the ones you still are going to get in kind of out there and waiting. But cleaning up sections, cleaning up your receiving, getting rid of the really, really old stuff, those are good things to do. Other things to consider are if you do book fairs, if you have a book fair that's in draft, that technically means it's still in the store physical proper, it's still the store's property, it still should be included in your counts. Even if it's kind of maybe boxed up and ready to go out for once PI is done, it's still technically the store's, so you'd want to make sure you got those draft status PI or book fair items as part of your counts. If you don't, they would simply get zeroed out, but then you could always go back in after the fact and fix them well after the PI is done, so that's not really the end of the world. Just bear in mind that if it's a draft book fair, it's not considered to be part of the on hold numbers. If it's an open book fair, that's where it gets a little fuzzy, because then it's a question of, okay, it may be out of the store, but it hasn't technically been marked as sold, so it's still the store property, still really should be considered to be our on hand or on hold. So maybe those you do want to count, but it all depends on what stage of the cycle you're in. It would be better if you can, ahead of the PI, finish up and close out any of those old outstanding book fairs that are hanging out there. Same for customer orders. Try to go in and tidy some of those up. See what ones are still hanging open that maybe are just never going to happen and they should be deleted. Same idea there. You can go to your details or details tab and then actions. There's a void option for your custom orders and book fairs. Vendor returns or overstock returns, vendor invoice, whatever you want to call them. Everybody's got their name, but under overstock returns, same idea there. Any that are kind of hanging out there. These draft ones they're draft in that I've really just started to think about them. I haven't actually pulled them from the shelf. They haven't actually been removed from the on hand. So these I would want to include in the counts that I'm doing. If I had any with a status of open, there too, that's kind of that, what stage of open is it at? Is it the open in that I haven't gotten a check back from the vendor, or I haven't gotten the fax back saying, yes, we approve you to send them back, or whatever. So just kind of take some time ahead of your physical inventories to tidy up those sort of long-standing, out-in-your-way type things. If it helps, you could print that purchase order status just to get a list, so you have a list of titles that might need to be investigated, and then just go into receiving, just delete the really old ones just to get them out of your way. And then you've got that paper report to refer to should there be any questions on why did we have such a huge discrepancy on this item. Oh yeah, I can see it was on that really old order and it really shouldn't have been. That's about kind of the things that would be good to do right ahead of the PI. I'd like to jump in. I know we're kind of running towards the late, but PI is such a big topic, it is hard to do it all in 1 hour. If anybody does need to jump out, feel free. I'll try to get this recording up on the website as soon as I can. but I think at this point we're probably good to pause for any other questions, and I next can start to download some batches that have some really goofy items so you can see how to delete and handle those weird cases. No other questions at the moment? All right, so I've gone through and I've got 2 stacks of books here. They're all pretty much from the Wizard of Oz series of books. They're an old Del Rey set I keep for testing. One stack, I have items that are already in my inventory deliberately, and another stack are ones that, even though I have them on my shelf, they're not in my Anthology inventory, so they're going to trigger a certain kind of state, and that's one of the things I want to show you. It's not uncommon to do your physical inventory and find, hey, wait a minute, there's something on our shelf that's not even in our system. Maybe it's because the ISBN was superseded when it was last ordered. Travel books are like that a lot. They'll supersede the ISBN for the same book, or the price has changed. There's any number of things that come up. I'm going to plug in my scanner here, and we'll go right back to the physical inventory, and I'm going to hide it so I can focus just on the one I've got hanging open here. Let's see, number 36. So on the master PI, the one that's open, I've gone through, I've done my scanner batch, I've connected it to my computer. Now I'm going to go up to Actions and do Get Data from Scanner. You'll hear it beep. The more beeps you hear, the larger the size of the batch. Just a rough rule of thumb. And that was maybe 6 items, so that was pretty short. So there's my scan batch that I just downloaded. It happens to be scan batch number 6. And again, it's probably a good idea. I've got scanner number 19, and it was in the children's section at 1:30. Whatever helps you out later on. It's more just informational. I'll save that. So this scanner, or this list that I'm seeing right now, is in the exact order that I scanned things in. And you can see there are some that have the same title. You're seeing some, and I just clicked on one that had no title that wasn't in the system. I'm going to cancel on that for the moment. You can see there's quite a few items. So my first impression is, okay, there's some gunk that needs to be dealt with. This might be where I call out to my runner, hey runner, can you go back to look at the children's section where batch scanner number 19 was just at, or maybe it's the person who was over in that section. Can you go look at and pull these items? Now you can either say it's the 2 or 3 units right after the Emerald City title, or maybe it's easier to print. I can do F11 print, and I'll say exception report. I don't need extended details. We'll get into that later. But if I do print, maybe I do want it by, I would assume you guys probably want by author at some point. In fact, let me just do by, yeah, let's do by section and author. That's usually pretty common. And this is just warning me, hey, you haven't posted anything. Are you sure you want to do this? That's okay. I just need to get a quick little report. So this exceptions report is going to show me anything that is having a problem, things that didn't find a match for. And it looks like it is sorted by ISBN. Let me cancel all this for a moment. I want to sort, and again, anytime I touch any of these that have that have no title, it's going to want to try to find those. And for the moment, I don't really want it to. Let's see if I can set that better here. So I will do an F6 consolidate quantities in a minute, but I want to see if I can get this to show up a little bit better. There we go. I want the items not found, and I want what's called context records. That is what would show me the record on either side of the problem item. There we go. So I can tell my runner, hey, go find that shelf, and right when you find the Emerald City of Oz, there should be at least one, and then there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things scanned after that, and then there was Darwin's Children. So go grab me these 5 items, and either you deal with them at that moment. That's what I think that was Donna asking about deleting line items. That's maybe something you do in this particular batch. Some people would delete those line items, toss the books into a corner, deal with them at the end. Some people want to go in and make the corrections in that batch so they don't really have to delete the line item. But maybe we'll do that route of you've got a bad batch, or a problem batch, whether you're going to do it at the very, very end, or you're going to kind of do it with each batch as you go. It doesn't really matter. And I'll get out of that print preview. So let's say now my runners come back and they've got the questionable items. Now that I have those questionable items in my hand, I'm going to first do a consolidate quantities just so I can focus a little bit better. I know that there's 3 of the road to Oz. I don't need to see it 3 times. So I'll consolidate, I'll F10 save. So one of the methods I can do is I'm either just going to look at the ISBN SKU, look at the book, whatever. I've only got 2 that don't happen to be a match. Or I can do F8 find line and scan the item. In fact, let's do that. I'll use my barcode scanner from the store, the regular one, and it found that item. So the one in my hand right now is the one that was recognized and found. I'm going to set that off to the side. No, that was not the problem one. Go ahead and put it back or throw it into the pile. We'll fix it later. If I do another F8 find line, I can just quickly go through the pile in front of me to find, well, what's the one that didn't line up? Okay, this is Road Oz. This one's good. I'll set him off to the side too. Not that one. Whatever method works for you. Aha! This one. The one in my hand called Scarecrow of Oz is not in the system. The moment I touched it, it tried to look in my own inventory. And now it's going in and saying, I couldn't find it in your own inventory. I'm reaching out to the internet to pull it back in. This is a case of the exact item that was on our shelf is not what was in the system. Maybe it was a different media type that I thought I had. Maybe it was a hardcover. So now in the batch itself, it's giving me a chance to fix this item and correct it. So I'm going to say, yes, go ahead and add it to my inventory, but it's also going to add it to this information to this batch. And it's going to give me the chance to set the details. Well, this is, I don't know about you guys, I couldn't really remember when I read this. It was probably 100 years ago. I'll just guess 3rd grade. So I'll fix any of the other details. This is a good chance to fix it. You don't necessarily have to fix it right now. Maybe it's you'll still include it in the batch counts, but you're going to tuck it in that little pile of, hey, somebody needs to go fix the author spelling on this later. Not critical about the counts today, but just at some point it needs to be fixed. But try to fix as much as you can if you've got the time to do it. I'll F12 save. And now it's saying, hey, you had another version of it. It doesn't recognize the next one in the list. It's actually talking about the one underneath that has a ZZ034 number. And in fact, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not sure what's going on there. Don't add it. Just let me search it again. So if I touch that item and I get the details, in fact, what has happened is that ZZ code, let me save that. And I'll scroll up here again so you can see a little bit better. That one that was in my hand, the Scarecrow, that's the one we just fetched. But this next one was one I kind of did deliberately and made it look weird. This next one is actually in the system, but it's under a different kind of code. Do you see how there's no title here, but yet I'm seeing down here a title? That means that it's in there under a slightly different code. More than likely, it was the UPC that was scanned on the back cover instead of the inside front cover EAN barcode. So the way I would handle this one might be, hey, runner, go find that item that was between Scarecrow and between Darwin's. Grab it and bring it up to me. Once they bring it up, then you're looking at, okay, what's the inside front cover? Oh, that was 979. You look at all the details of information. Now, if I'm not sure, I can right-click on this item. In fact, I might even just go down to this one and say right-click master file, and it'll take me to the record that it thinks it matched. And the reason why it matched is because I had accidentally scanned on the back cover the UPC code. Let's see if I can find this one for you. I scanned this string of numbers. Very easy mistake to have happen early on. It's not uncommon. It's just one of those, hey, train everybody so that they kind of eyeball and know. In fact, I'll show you what I did. I scanned this one, not this one. So it's a different string of numbers, but it's not really the end of the world because I did happen to earlier, even though I messed up the ISBN, the true ISBN, I had that UPC in the system. So the system found it. In fact, I don't even need to make any changes. I'll say no, don't save change. I'll go back to that record, and instead of using the ZZZ, it identified it by something else. In fact, I can go to my actions, and there's now this is a newer thing that you guys might not have had in the last couple of years, a tool for refresh batch info. I'll click that. It's now kind of refreshed the screen, even though it had been identified by this code when it was downloaded from the scanner batch. It had matched it, in which its true core SKU1, whatever you want to call it, is this oddball ZZ item. Now, I actually happen to have a real copy of Scarecrow over there. So I might go, you know what, I don't really even need to outright delete and re-add. I just need to take this guy's counts, which happen to be 3, and put it into this one. So I can just add 3 more to this guy, although technically I already kind of scan this batch. I see what you mean, Donna. That was actually one of the things I ran into, is I can't seem to edit the count from within this batch, at least at the moment. I may have to do something to unlock that. Let me take a look here. Let's do another refresh. Ah, that may be one of the things you're running into is, while you can delete a line, it doesn't look like it's letting me edit the quantity, but I may be able to do something else. Let's consolidate quantities. That's actually a whole different record too, now that I look at it. Let me check something here. Master file. So this is the kind of stuff it's so very random, the issues that you can come up with. I want to show you the tools you can use to find the answer. So I just did a master file on one of the flavors, and I can see I actually have several Scarecrow of Oz. And let me scooch that ISBN column over for you. Right here. You can see I have multiple versions with multiple interesting strings. One of them has the back UPC code. The one I really want it to be under is here. So I might actually say, you know what, I'm going to put this guy in the figure it out later pile because it's already taken more than 10 minutes and I need to get these batches downloaded and going. So there's a good argument for, if there's a question, find it, yank it, throw it in a pile, deal with it. It's all matter of personal preference. But in this case, I'm going to close out of the inventory. I've pulled this oddball copy. I've pulled the real version. I'm just going to delete this line from the batch. Now, it does look like I can go back through and do F5 new line and put in the real barcode, the correct one, either hand key or not. And it's saying, hey, wait a minute, you've already got this on here, and I have 3 units of the oddball. So I'm just going to go say, yes, I know it's on here. Okay, I'll edit the quantity. So it's already landed on the real version, and I know I had 3 units, so here's where I can change it. Let me make a note of that, guys. That's a good testing one for me. So we could not edit quantity. We had to first delete. This is a thing I can probably have changed. And then when we did F5 new line, we added it, and that's when we got the chance to correct it. So that might be a good thing for your notes, Donna, is if you do find, hey, there's a weird item, you can delete it, but you can re-add it under the correct number in that same batch as you're working. Glad we found that.
We had a similar problem in our book fair recently.
Okay, and it may be, I can't remember if we did have you guys go to the very newest, you're on a fairly new one. One of the changes we've done to the physical inventory module over the last couple of years is a much better job on those very cases of if you scan the UPC or the ISBN 10 versus ISBN 13. So you might consider, if you're not already on the 9.5, it would probably be good to get you on 9.5.102 before you do your PI. That might help with little items that are maybe you identify by SKU 2 instead of the ISBN. Excuse me, losing my voice here.
Is that possible to do tomorrow, do you think? Because we're on 9.3.
Yeah, how busy are you guys going to be this weekend, do you think? I don't want you to be too overexposed. Or are you guys starting this Saturday? I forget.
Monday.
Monday? Is the store going to be closed on Monday?
It is.
Okay. What time are you guys going to start?
9.
I don't know. Mike might be still in here. He's He may be one of the guys doing the upgrade. We can touch base on that and get back with you a little bit later today. How about?
That sounds great.
I'm
Thank
here.
Okay. How late do you guys close tonight, too, and open tomorrow?
you. We close at 8 and open at 10, but I could be here earlier than 10 tomorrow to do it if that's better.
It might be possible, Mike. Let's talk about 9.3. It does mean we'd need to do the upgrade on each workstation. It's not a big deal, but it does take a little bit to do. And if we get logged into the server, we can get the server going, which I forget. Wait a minute, you guys are APC, aren't you? I totally forgot.
What is that?
The APC is a leased server, so you guys have your own server, and you've got, it looks like, 2 stations? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
that should be easy. Yeah, 2 stations is easy, so that won't take very long to do. Yeah, we could certainly do that tomorrow morning. The only worry I have is if it's going to look really different or if it's going to cause any big questions over the weekend. I wouldn't think so, but if you're going to be closed Monday morning, we could also do it then, too. Easy enough. But we'll figure that part out for you.
Okay.
So I've gotten a scanner batch downloaded. I found some weird situations, and it was through things like right-clicking either on the item down here to see, well, what item did it think it was, looking at it through master files. I could have even made a correction at that time. Maybe it really should have been under this section. Those little kind of cleanup things, if you've got the time to do it, great. You might notice here, if I'm in the PI, whether I'm in a batch or in the open PI, and I'm making a kind of fix, like I want to fix this Darwin's Children title, if I right-click on it and I either do master file or edit inventory, either one. Master file just brings me to the full out, can see all the details, where edit is just going to give me the quick things. This is maybe number 1 of the series. Any other kind of change I need to make. But if I fix the section here, let me see if I can scooch this down for you, you'll see that as I do F12 save, it's going to update that grid. That's one of the newer things we've put in. It's doing a better job of kind of refreshing the grid as you go. So as you're about ready to post your scanner batch, that's a good time to kind of peek and go, great, those sections are correct. Oh, no, wait a minute, that should have been something else. And you'll have the chance to correct it right from within the PI. You will have the ability as well, and there's a couple caveats, but I'll show you that in a moment. You will have the ability as well to kind of make those corrections outside of the physical inventory. There are some good reasons to do that, but just know that if you make those kind of fix the section, fix the author, fix the title, fix the price, don't touch the on-hand quantity though. That's not something you want to fix from that angle from within PI. You're going to do that by doing the PI itself. So don't do like edit inventory and try to change this number. The whole goal is to let the PI process do that for you. But if you make a change on any of those things from within the PI, whether you're in the scanner batch or you go here and you're in the master PI and you make that kind of change, that's all fine. Just make sure you F10 save the inventory record. And now when you go back here, you might need to also F10 save your PI. You might also want to periodically go to actions, and you'll see there's a refresh batch info, but there's also a refresh data. That's a good one to use on your master PI from time to time. The reason for doing that, the actions refresh data, would be if I do have somebody over on a different workstation and they're sitting there, just say in master files inventory with that pile of problem books, and their job is to purely stay in here, search for the item, look it up, make a correction, save it. Don't change the on-hand, don't try to fix the on-orders, just fix the bibliotype stuff. Their job is to do that. They can do that on a different workstation, it won't hurt. This is the put a big red flag sign on your monitor. No 2 people should be working on the same PI. It's just like a purchase order. You don't want to try to work on the same item, the same list, if you will, because you could end up stepping on each other's changes. That's why we say only one machine should be driving the PI, only one machine should be downloading the scanners. There are possibilities for more complicated for that, but this is not the place to get into it. If you have a really outstanding situation, call us and we can go over the details and come up with some suggestions. But if somebody's fixing the titles from outside the PI, that's fine. Just make sure that periodically whoever is driving the PI, they F10 save and they periodically do a refresh data so that they will start to see those new sections and new author spellings and whatever else got changed. Let me do one more quick pile of stuff that is not in the system. I wanted to make a couple other really weird scenarios happen. In fact, let me scan some things on my desk that are very definitely not books. I'll do a couple that are. I'll do some UPC codes here so we can see how interesting those make a batch look. And I'll throw in a couple of books that are not in my inventory. There we go. So now I'll connect this scanner and we'll download a fresh batch of some other weird things that might happen to you, things that just over time the inventory record didn't get created right or something got typed in wrong. That stuff happens. So I'll go back up to the master PI again. I'm on the open. I'll say actions, get data from scanner, lots of beeps. And so now there's my PI batch number 7. Notice I have number 6 out there, the scan batch that I didn't finish yet. That's okay. I can download as many scan batches as I want and then kind of circle back around once the kind of the rush of scanners coming back is done. So now that I've got a quiet moment, I'll start looking at those scan batches and you can see, wow, this is a really weird case. This is maybe, it turns out that they grabbed something from a back room that you hadn't intended on being counted because it wasn't really ready to be in the system yet. Those kind of cases happen. So as you're driving the PI and you're looking at these batches, those kinds of things will kind of trigger, wait a minute, where were you just at? Oh, no, I don't want that shelf. Go, we don't want this batch at all. Delete it. So in fact, you can actually delete an entire scan batch and start fresh if you needed. But what we're seeing here is I scanned one title that actually did happen to be in my inventory. It was recognized. But then I scanned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units that weren't identified. A 6th unit was, although it had an odd title. This is something from my store I created ages ago and never got around to fixing. At that time, I couldn't fetch the title. And then I scanned a bunch of other items that aren't in the system. So at this point, more is not found in this batch than is, so I might just kind of first do a consolidate, I'll save it, and then of course it touched the very next blank one, so it wants to try to fetch it immediately, but I'm going to say no for the moment. I'll sort by title and I'll bring all the blank ones into one group. Let me get rid of this title here. So if I start with the very first item, just looking at that one, I don't want to select that one yet. This 2468 number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 digits, but yet I don't really recognize it. My runner goes and looks around and, wait a minute, I just found this, I don't know what is it, an air freshener. It's a 10-digit number, which usually is an ISBN 10, but it's not coming up as a translated number. It's not suggesting an ISBN 10 or an ISBN 13. And I finally scrounge around and, oh, it was this weird sideline item. Okay, fine. I'll add it to my inventory. For whatever reason, it just got missed. And let's see if I can even type it right. Maybe I even have my own store sticker on it, and it's called, I don't know, AF. I'll write down what's on this thing. 582 Sugar Skull Rose something. So, and it was $5, and I don't know what my actual list is. I'll just say it was $2.50, just as a guess for the moment. And it does have to have a department. I'll put it in my stationery department, and I'll just call it art. So you can add something if it's found and doesn't exist in the system already. Probably a good time to get it in anyway. So now I've just corrected that oddball item. Just make sure you F10 save. You might do another consolidate quantities in case you have a bunch of other items like that. So now I'm just going to continue working down through this batch to find what about this pile of stuff that got scanned and what are these. This one that says 10, I'm just kind of looking at my desk and see what all I scanned. I wasn't even paying attention. This one that is 103510 is a box of cards. Same thing. Wasn't in my system. Fine, I'll add it. And I'm using the Alt F5 add to inventory, which actually does two things. We want to add it to our inventory, which is kind of the end all of all this, but I also want to get it to show properly in this batch. So it's kind of a two-step thing. I'm populating the core inventory record in the background. Actually, I think this is a Fitbit watch. Let's see, I think it cost 15. It cost me 10. Let's see. Not sure. I'll just put in that department for now. So I'm fixing these items, the weird ones that it came up in the scanner batch. I'm doing that sort of investigation of, you know, who, what, when, why, where. This one, as soon as I touched on it, it recognized it as being an ISBN. It didn't see that it was really in the system correctly. So I'll say, yes, I want to add it. It's pulling from my external inventory. I think I'm using Ingram right now. I'm not sure. So this is the Patchwork Girl of Oz title. I'm happy with the department. I'm happy with the section. That learned associations has come into play, and it knew the last time I picked fiction, fantasy, general that I had put it as a grades 3 through 4. So I'm happy with that. Great. I'll F12 save that one. And now that batch has been updated a little bit further. And I'm just going to keep going through my pile of items to see what is in this batch that didn't at least come in with, didn't get noticed or recognized at first. I'll just finish adding the rest of these really quickly. Maybe I just never got to that batch at some point, never got it fully received. That happens. And again, that looks good. I'll save that one. And this last one, I believe, this is my example of a SKU, a UPC that was on the back one of those books and was in that list. That title that I just had in my hand is The Road is considered to be, at least in the first case, that string of numbers, the ending 495. Notice I didn't get the 52. My barcode scanner for my cash register is programmed to not pick up those last two digits. If I can highlight it very well here. These last few right here. Because I scanned the UPC, but the printed string, let me return my cursor back to normal. This item is actually being identified by another title. And it happens to be that that string right there, that ending 0495, that actually may be repeated. In fact, here it is right here. The same UPC that is on my Road to Oz number 5 is also on my Rinkatink number 10. So if I'm not careful, I could have accidentally double counted to the wrong version. Now that's not uncommon to have the UPC, especially sidelines, to be the same. So that's where training everybody to recognize that you really want to scan the proper version. If they're not sure, give them an example, paste it up on the counter. But you can see how scanning the wrong barcode is now going to make me try to figure out, well, what is this under? If I go do an actions and say refresh batch info, if I had put that string into the system, it would try to find it. But apparently I never put it in the system under this explicitly, but I know I already have two items that it could be under. So I'm kind of faced with, well, I have this mystery item on my desk. I'm not sure what it really was. I had my runner pull it from the shelf. Okay, for now, I'm just going to delete that line, and I will throw the oddball item into that pile. I'll deal with it later. In fact, maybe I'll even just make a note to deal with it when this is all said and done, and next week when the PI is over, I'll go back and fine-tune those few little weird things just to figure out what on earth was going on. In fact, I'll save that batch. So now I could post that little batch. Everything's been kind of tidied up and corrected, at least best I can for the moment. In fact, I'll show you one thing that I did want to do deliberately. Let's say I had on the same shelving unit, I had also scanned this guy. It just kind of looked like that when I downloaded it. I know off the top of my head that this is not a children's book. This is not self-help. It does have a very similar ISBN. Notice it starts with 0345. It's also a Del Rey, like these Oz books, but it's definitely not children. It's definitely not self-help. It needs to be fixed. Question is, do I count it or include it in this batch? Or do I delete it and say, go reshelve it into the area that it should be under? But did that area get counted or not? That's a question. That might be a reason to toss it into the pile, because you can't always know exactly what shelf has been counted unless you've marked it, maybe a Post-it note. But you kind of have that decision of, do I just fix it right now and include it? That's okay. And just be careful when I do hit that section later. That's up to you, really. In this case, I'll fix the title. And I couldn't quite hear, somebody was saying something. There we go. So in this case, I'll include it. I just got to make sure that when they get around to the Greg Bear section over in the science fiction area, then I need them to be a little cautious and look for the Darwin's Children titles. There's probably another couple of the series. But I can also say delete that batch, but let's just include it just to have something. We'll post that batch. And now we're kind of towards the end of the PI. This is probably a good time to kind of start wrapping. We're at 12:30 right now. So let's say that that one scan batch that I had looked at earlier didn't have time, or it was just a mess. Not sure what was going on. You can always get rid of a batch itself. Maybe you just decided, go back and rescan that now that you know the right UPCs versus EAN barcodes to do. Let's say you've kind of finished everything up. Everything that can be scanned has. Everything's been kind of nice and reorganized. Things are looking good. So now you're towards the end of things. You want to go back to your OpenPI. You want to do one more F10 save, one more F12 post update, just to kind of scooch everything to that final total count column. Again, F12 post update is not the hard end-all replace. That's just kind of a mini step. Just enough of a chance for you to do one more review to see, is there anything on the extremes? Did we miss something? You might, in fact, this is one of the things I usually recommend, is to sort by the discrepancy column towards the end and go to the very ends. Look at the very high discrepancy numbers and the very negative discrepancy numbers. You may find something didn't get counted. Like this cover her face title, I doubt I really had 7,000 units of it to begin with. I'm going to guess that was a typo. So I'm just going to go in and say, no, I had somebody double check. I only have 5. Yes, that's a huge discrepancy. I'll figure out why the oops later. Make a note, print it out, whatever. In fact, there's a tool here in a moment you'll see that you can get a report of the discrepancies, so you have a list of things that might need investigating, because if they're wrong here, maybe it's because of bad receiving habits or something got put in correctly. That kind of stuff happens. But I'll do that last save. I've kind of checked my extremes. I've looked at the very highs, the very lows, make sure nothing got missed, make sure nothing got overcounted or undercounted. Towards the end, as you're kind of happy with that, one of the last things you might do is another F11 print and maybe do the exception report. Say all sections and just enough of a quick review. And it's saying I haven't posted this PI, or that's fine. I just want a quick look at the exception report so I can see, kind of zero in on, what's, wow, 20 units off, really? Those kinds of questions. If you've got time toward the end of the PI to do those, great. Sometimes you've just got to get the doors open and deal with stuff later. Several stores I know that they come in, they do their counts, and they just post it all, warts and everything, and then the manager's job over the next couple of days is just to kind of look at those discrepancy reports and to go figure out, well, why was there a huge discrepancy? And then they'll trace back and they'll find, oh, we've got a new staffer who's been receiving for the last several weeks, and nobody told them about putting in the discount, or they didn't catch that detail. That stuff happens. But as you've kind of reviewed your PI, you've got your totals scooched over to total count, you've done your exception review, you're happy with the numbers, it's as good as it's going to get. So one of your very last steps is save. kick everybody outside of the program. If they're in inventory cleaning up, now's the time for everybody to pause. This is one of the sort of last big steps, and it can be a little time consumptive, not hugely, but just enough to need to be important. I'm going to do a quick backup first, and I'll just do tools, quick backup. I'll run that just so I have a backup on file. And I'm going to start to do the final commitment. So this is where I want to make sure nobody ideally would be in the system. You wouldn't be doing sales actively at this moment. My inventory is pretty small, so this won't take very long. Ideally, stores would be closed for inventories. We know that's not always possible, but it is the best way to get the most accurate count. So I'm happy with everything at this point. I am ready to do the final all-out change. You know, there were a couple things I did want to show you guys before I do that. One quick little addition. There may be items in your store that you have already counted, and Susie, this might be something you want to look at. If you've already kind of pre-counted a section and you know it's 99% correct, maybe you sort by section in the grid, maybe you sort by publisher, anything to kind of zero in on that group of items that you know are correct, but you don't want to have to count all over again. You could go in, and once you've isolated that chunk of records, let me find something with an example here. Let's say I found these guys. I don't want to bother recounting all of these. I just want to get those numbers over to my total count. So I can, under actions, this is one that you guys might find useful for quite a few things. Copy INV quantity to count quantity. What it means is it's going to take the 20 units that I have on this Road to Oz title that I assumed the system says I had when I created the PI this morning, and I want it to copy 20 units over into count to basically say it's correct already, there's no discrepancies. I do need to do that other little post update, so let me do this copy count quantity, or to count quantity. So now I have 20 units in that Road to Oz under count. I'll do one last F12 update just to scooch everything over one last time to that final total count column. Let me squish these columns down for you. Now I'm ready to do my very last, the final Alt F12, get everything replaced. So everybody's out. I'm going to say, yes, I want to update my quantity on hands, and it's going to take whatever is in this PI. If an item is on this PI list and there's a number in the total count column, or even a 0, it will replace your inventory on hand. It won't do any kind of net effect change. It just outright replaces it. And then we'll say, yes, we want to close this. And sure, we can print an exception report if we want. I'll skip it for now. And now it's going through and actually doing those changes. That was pretty fast. Yours might take another 5 minutes. The moment you see this state change from open to complete, if I can highlight that for you, right there, I know it's a done deal. And now I can safely have people get in, start their day. Now I can start the process of printing reports. One other report that you should consider doing after you finish your physical inventory is to print one more inventory status report as a final, as a post picture. So you might print it right ahead of it so you have a pre-inventory value, possibly gunky numbers. You'll do your physical inventory, get things corrected, print the exception report so you have the dollar amount of discrepancies and the units of discrepancies, and then print an inventory status at the end after it's all changed for a post-inventory picture. Often I hear accountants and tax people want sort of, what was your inventory before? What were the discrepancies? What did you end up at the end when it was all corrected? So it's good information to have and good information to save off somewhere safe. But now that that PI is done, I should be able to go and now see the results of fixing some items. So like this guy where I realized I did not have 7,000 units on hand. If I go right to the master file for this cover her face title now, you'll see the on hand is now 5, like I told it to be. And it did do a little math to kind of show me that I touched it, but it's just showing that I had reduced it by the 7,087 to come up with the real 5 units. It's just more of a matter of showing you that this was the net effect here, but we just outright replaced the on-hands. So same thing here, I should have 21 units of this flavor of the Road to Oz. So there's my 21 units there, and I just have a record in the inventory history, this one marked on hand edit, with today's date showing me that it was touched and changed via the physical inventory tool. In the next generation, next version 9.6, I've asked them to show what PI batch number or what load data batch number something came from. So if later on you're trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, what happened, you'll at least be able to go back and go, oh yeah, that was PI number 12, and find out the details there. Probably the last little detail is I wanted to show one of the tools you might use as a sort of leading up to physical inventory is to do the inventory status and or sales history report. And let me see if I can pick on a certain area. I tried to set up some sample records. I'm going to say I want inventory status by summary. And for now, I just want department, just to kind of get a step back and look at the bigger level first to get a sense of how are my cost of goods looking. Are there areas that it's just way off? And once I've identified those areas that it's just way off, let's see, I think I created one called, this one called PI9. Right now it's saying my cost basis for 28 units is 156. That's very tiny. Let me do the math. 156 by 28 units. That's 557 per unit. That's not quite right. By just whatever I've got in my memory. So right off the bat, I know something's off in my PI, my department called PI, or whatever the name is. So I might then start zeroing in a little further. Okay, I'll pick on that PI department, and maybe I want to now go by the sections to further zero in on the possible problem item. So now I'll go and say, show me just the PI department, but do subtotals by section for the moment. So then I can zero in even a little closer. Okay, the cost basis for 1 unit of something in the PI department, but the looks like Science 2 section, that cost basis of $5.99 is not correct. Okay, zero in a little further. So using tools like those can help you zero in on those areas that maybe there has been a receiving problem. You can use the inventory status to see what about the state of your present inventory. Is there anything on hand right now whose cost is really wacky? Is there anything that you previously sold whose cost was really wacky? And zero in on those items. You may end up going and finding the item, and let me find one of those items I did deliberately set up today. I wanted to show you what happens when we find a weird item. Let's see, one of the Darwin titles, I believe. There we go. In the end, it turned out that I have a title that accidentally was received along with the other Oz children's books, and it very much wasn't, and I put in the wrong discount, whatever it is that I kind of zero in on. Okay, there's something weird with this title, and I go to look at it, and I see an inventory history, 25% discount on a vendor receiving memo, probably not correct. That's probably part of why my costing is wonky. I can get that kind of information from other angles too. If I look at the details tab, I'll see the last receipt. That might tell me. I can look at the sales tab to see if it's been sold. I'll see things like my units sold per month or per week. I'll see my margin markup. I could also find that kind of detail too if I went into, say, master files sections. Same idea there. I can go to the sales tab in that tool and see that kind of angle of information. There's the business center tool. That's another great one to find details. But ultimately, once I find that item and I realize, okay, it was this particular receiving memo that was just not right on. I needed to have corrected it. It shouldn't have been 25%. It should have been 42. If I'm on my master file inventory POs tab and I find that line item in the POs that needs to be corrected, I can see the discount here, 25. I can see this item here. Okay, it was on PO number 5488. I can do a right click here. I don't have to go outright and search the whole other screen for it. I can just go right click, go to parent, and that will take me right to the historical, that gray historical shipment record for that line item where I can then go to actions and say, you know what, I need to edit that receiving cost. It wasn't 25% for this one item, it was really 42. Fix that line item, save that change. You can fix things like the price and the discount. You cannot change the units because this is a historical record and audit trail, if you will. We don't want to mess with the units. We're more concerned about fixing costing at this stage. So now that I've corrected that one item on that historical order, I can go in and say, you know what, recalculate it because I know I sold it since I received it. Recalculate that item. And I could do just the one item, but it's just as fast to do all of them. There is a third step it talks about down here. A third step that it mentions here is one that you don't necessarily have to do all the time. If you've been doing a huge amount of correcting cost of goods sold, you probably would want to run it periodically. But I'll go ahead and calculate. And just so I can show you what that third step is, again, you don't have to do this every night, maybe once a month, maybe once a week if you're doing a lot of corrections. But if I go to my tech utilities, there's a couple of options, but I want to do the one for roll sales history. That is what will force the sales bucket type numbers like margin, markup, sold last week, sold last year. It'll kind of force all those to recalculate and refresh. There's no harm if you do run this from time to time. I would suggest that you set it to preserve all three settings for customer, station, and user. That's just how it's going to preserve the records. And you might as well just say all history. You could do a smaller chunk if you've got a really huge set, but or long history of data, but it's quick enough to just say all history. And yes, I'll roll that sales history. You'll see it kind of ticks through my transactions on that top right. I don't have very many, so it's pretty quick. I usually would do this kind of like after close, after Z-tape, everybody else is gone for the night. I might kick it off and just walk out the door and let it finish overnight. In fact, it's already done on mine. It doesn't take very long. That's something you don't normally have to do very often. As long as you're doing your Z-tape for the most part every day or at least once a week, that kind of roll sales history stuff is kind of built into the Z-tape, but you can go back in after the fact and redo that. Count turns, that's another one that gets into costing stuff. I believe in the email I sent, I included a couple of PDFs. When you start getting into why does my cost look weird, then you're probably going to want to refer to either the help system, there's a training video on this as well, but the PDF that you might look at is the one called Costing and Sales Value Overview. This is where we talk about how does Anthology come up with the cost of goods sold, how do we come up with the value of an existing inventory item, how do you go through and fix it, what are some of the fallback tools. There's quite a bit of detail there. There's a really good video, and that is on our YouTube channel. In fact, there's a few other topics, but there's one for tools on reassign, merge, cleanup you might want to watch. There's another video out there that talks about just the basic overview of the PI. There are quite a few other videos out there. I'm trying to find the one that specifically talks about costing here. I believe if you go to the videos link and you hit the search over here and we type in COGS, there we go. I just had it. Let's try that again so I can actually search. I think it's actually modify COGS, isn't it? Oh, it's modify cost of. I spelled it out. There we go. Modify cost of goods sold. This video talks about pretty much what this document shows. So whatever you prefer to do, read or listen, either way. That's